Hey everyone, and welcome to The Year Was, a podcast all about today. I'm your host Michael Montalvo, and together we take the history train back in time once again to discover what makes today truly unique. For the next few minutes, we continue to gather random nuggets of trivia to make you sound smart, or just drop that little fact that makes others stop and say, "Hey, who invited you? Like, seriously, why are you here?" On this episode, we examine the events that occurred today, July 24th. I had an opportunity to talk about this previously and decided against it. And when I saw that it would come up again, I really couldn't resist. However, I do feel it is important to note that my intention is not to make fun of, but rather to inform. And I hope I can do that here today. The year was 1847, and on this day, Brigham Young and his followers of the Mormon religion made it to Salt Lake City, Utah. Talking about religion is hard to do. Here we are talking about a man more so than the actual religion. He just happens to be the second president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So, wish me luck. Here we go. Brigham Young was born on June 1st, 1801, in Whittingham, Vermont, USA. Born to John Young and his wife Abigail, he was the ninth of 11 children, and according to everything I read, at age 3, the family moved to upstate New York, where he would remain for some time. After his mother died in 1815, he decided to leave home and make his living, and at age 16, he did just that. He worked as a carpenter, a joiner. It's like a carpenter, but more ornamental. A glazier, a person who fits glass into windows and doors. A painter, a landscape gardener, a farmer, and finally as a general handyman. He married the first of his many wives, Miriam Angeline Young, in 1824, and together the couple moved to Minden, New York, approximately 40 miles from Manchester, where, as fate would have it, Joseph Smith was in the final stages of preparing the Book of Mormon. Guys, I'm struggling not to make a Book of Mormon joke or a South Park joke here. Now, Young had converted to Methodism in 1823, but was drawn to Smith's new Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints, henceforth referred to as LDS, after having his first encounter with the Book of Mormon in 1830. It would be 2 years later that he would lose his wife, she died at 26, be baptized into the Mormon Church, and would go to Canada as a missionary. The following year, 1833, he led many of his friends and family to join Joseph Smith at the Gathering of Zion in Kirkland, Ohio. I couldn't find much on this subject, and Joseph Smith is a topic all to himself, so I will refrain for the time being from going into too much detail, but from what I can gather, they were building a temple. The LDS website mentions it as the stone carved out of the mountain without hands had begun its worldwide mission, rolling slowly at first, but increasing in speed and size as time progressed. I think that refers more to the people and the religion growing than the actual building of the temple, but if anyone knows this for sure, just leave me a comment. While in Kirkland, he did carpentry work and led preaching missions. He traveled to Missouri in 1834, where non-Mormons were threatening the Mormon community. He spread the word to the eastern states and was a firm supporter of Joseph Smith when the Kirkland settlement failed in 1837. He followed Smith to Missouri the next year, and after anti-Mormon mobs drove the community out, it was Brigham Young that organized the move to Nauvoo, Illinois. But he didn't stop there. He actually traveled to England from 1840 to 41 and gained many converts. His devotions so impressed Joseph Smith that he was made the president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. And I hear what you're asking. What is the Quorum of the 12 Apostles? Well, let me try to explain. Brigham Young was ordained as an apostle on February 14th, 1835 by the three witnesses. The three witnesses being Oliver Cowdery, who was granted the power to baptize from John the Baptist along with Joseph Smith, David Whitmere, and Martin Harris, who transcribed the golden plates from Joseph Smith's reading of them. Oliver Cowdery had been granted this ability having been ordained to the Melchizedek priesthood by the apostles Peter, James, and John. Whitmore and Harris were empowered that same day by laying their hands onto Joseph Smith. With this new status as an apostle, he was named third in the quorum of the 12 apostles. Now, what these guys did was basically everything. They directed missionary work, immigration and settlement, and all construction projects. These 12 men were the governing body of the church, and as such, were second only to Joseph Smith. After his mission work to England, Brigham Young was named as this body's president, meaning it was Joseph Smith, then Brigham Young, and then everybody else. It was a huge honor. This episode is a little bit difficult to do, and I can't believe what I'm about to say. It is insane. In 1844, Joseph Smith announced his candidacy for the presidency of the United States. He didn't have the appeal, and he needed that to win, but his running increased the anti-Mormon sentiment all around. A group of Mormons that disagreed with Smith began publishing a newspaper that was highly critical of the then accepted practice of polygamy and of Joseph Smith's leadership in general. In response, he just had the paper destroyed. The resulting threat of violence made him call out the militia in the Mormon town of Nauvoo. He was actually charged with treason and conspiracy by Illinois authorities, and along with his brother, was imprisoned in the Carthage city jail. On June 27, 1844, an anti-Mormon mob broke in and murdered the two brothers. While this is going on, Brigham Young was on the East Coast in Boston. He was there to gather converts and raise money for the construction of a temple in Nauvoo. And on his return, he played a major role in keeping the church together by organizing an exodus that would take the Mormons west, first to Nebraska in 1846 and finally to Utah's Salt Lake City, where they arrived July 24th, 1847. He remarked simply, "This is the place." He was able to lead this massive move because after the murder of Joseph Smith, Young was chosen to lead the people. And after his leadership was confirmed in 1847, he was named president and prophet of the church, gaining the authority of Joseph Smith. And honestly, after a few years, things were going really well. Utah was organized as a territory, and Young was appointed its governor and superintendent of Indian affairs. But it didn't last long. People began to fear that Utah would be a theocracy, and with the 1852 announcement that polygamy was a basic tenet of the church, they were accused of immorality. And speaking of polygamy, I couldn't find an exact number, but Brigham Young is said to have had anywhere from 20 to 55 wives and 47 children. Brigham Young was actually even quoted saying, after being taught about plural marriage, "It was the first time in my life that I desired the grave." The 1850s saw then President James Buchanan's Mormon War, including the Mountain Meadows Massacre, where John D. Lee murdered 120 immigrants suspected of hostility towards the church, a conflict that Lee claimed he enacted on the orders of Brigham Young. In the 1860s, Young saw his people flourish, but by the 1870s, Brigham Young was tried for polygamy, it having been made illegal in the United States territories in 1862, but he was not convicted. Federal officials also brought Lee to trial for the Mountain Meadows Massacre in 1877, hoping to prove Young's involvement. However, Lee refused to implicate Young. Brigham Young remained the church leader until his death shortly after Lee's trial on August 29, 1877, of peritonitis, which, if you don't know, is caused by a leakage or a hole in the intestines, and is an inflammation of the membrane lining of the abdominal wall and covering of the abdominal organs. What's an interesting epilogue to the story is that he also established the Perpetual Immigrating Fund Company that assisted around 80,000 converts in moving to Utah from Great Britain, Scandinavia, and Europe. He contracted a transcontinental telegraph line from Nebraska to California and a 1,200-mile desert telegraph line from Idaho to Arizona in order to connect Mormon communities. Due to Young's constant prodding, Utah gave women the vote in 1870, 50 years before the 19th Amendment. He founded Brigham Young University, the University of Utah, and the Salt Lake Theater. He was a friend to Native Americans and delivered sermons emphasizing a practical religion, the improvement of living conditions, correct behavior, and the achievement of harmonious social relationships. These are only a few of the many accomplishments and stories of his life, and anyone that is interested in learning more, I really urge you to look into it because it's honestly a roller coaster of events that well worth your time. That is going to do it for us today. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can find an audio version on iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, and Google Play, pretty much anywhere you get your podcast. If you like the podcast and if you want to hear more, give us a rate and a review. That helps me out and lets me know what direction to keep this going in. And hey, if you liked it, share it with a friend. They might like it too. You can find me on social media and at YouTube at the Apple Cider Club. And as always, I want to thank the Tim Kreitz Band for our musical theme. And thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.